So I spent 8 hours in the emergency room this past weekend, and the reason why I wanted to share this update with you is because it's kind of a milestone for me. It was actually the first time that I have ever gone to the hospital voluntarily. So the title of this video is a little cheeky because I have been handcuffed most times prior that I've been escorted to the hospital against my will. So this was the first time that I went of my own free will. I've kind of been sharing updates about my med reduction process or journey, I guess you could call it. And, I shared recently that it wasn't going well. So I made some, adjustments with my care team to address that. And so I went back up to what I used to be on as a therapeutic dose of my antipsychotic. And it seemed like it was going okay for about a week. But then last week, it started to go really not well. So I started to have a lot more symptoms, primarily hallucinations, but mostly like confused thought too. So it was hard to differentiate between what were hallucinations and what were my own thoughts. I think what was happening was I was having hallucinations that were telling me certain things, and then I was getting jumbled up thinking, well, these must be my thoughts too, and this must be what I'm thinking and feeling as well. And so that got really confusing. And, the tumultuousness of this and the paranoia that I was experiencing as well kind of led to relationship conflict. And I'm sure, I hope anyway, that I'm not alone in this and that some of you may be able to relate to that. When you are really struggling with your illness, it can be really difficult to be a good partner, but also to be in good communication with your partner. And I think that another thing that was at play here was that, our relationship conflict came up also around the fact that my partner, Ra, was noticing that, things were not typical. Things were becoming a little bit more unstable for me. But I couldn't really see this, or I was in denial of this. And so that bit about anosognosia, having a lack of insight into one's illness, was kind of at play. So long story short, I think what happened was my increased symptoms led to relationship conflict, and the stress of this relationship conflict led to the further exacerbation of my symptoms, and it all got to be just too much, and I ended up making the decision that I needed to go to the hospital. I got to this decision because I realized that I needed to go up onto my antipsychotic, and I kind of thought that my antipsychotic that I was on had stopped working because I was on a relatively high dose again of it that I had been on prior as a therapeutic dose. And so I was kind of wondering if that had just stopped working for me and if I needed to add an additional antipsychotic. But regardless, that's what I wanted to talk to a doctor about. And so initially, because this was happening after hours again, so I couldn't call my own psychiatrist. But basically, I called the crisis support services that my psychiatrist had told me to call, which I talked about in a previous video as well. And they were less than helpful. They basically said that they wouldn't see me and they wouldn't, a psychiatrist wouldn't even meet with me because I already have a psychiatrist, even though I didn't have access to that psychiatrist and I was kind of in a crisis point and needed help now. They told me that I could go to the hospital if I wanted to. So I was like, cool, I guess I'll go to the hospital and do my best to not freak out because, I have a lot of trauma around hospitals, and that was a really hard thing for me to voluntarily be like, okay, yeah, I think that's the best thing for me is to go to the hospital to talk with a doctor there. So I ended up going to the hospital. Rob took me to the hospital, and we waited 8 hours in the emergency room before I was able to see a doctor. And, why this is, it's a problem because that's a really long time to wait, especially when you're in crisis. But I saw people coming and going quite frequently with physical ailments. And so it kind of sucked to really see firsthand how our medical system kind of diminishes the importance of mental health and mental illness and whatnot. And so anyway, 8 hours later, I ended up seeing a ER doctor, just a general ER doctor. And that was pretty unhelpful too. He basically was like, hey, I don't deal with this, I just treat like acute mental illness, if mental illness at all. I'm all about the acute, physical stuff. And so I was like, okay, like this is where literally everyone tells me that I should come if I'm in crisis with my mental health and you don't really know how to help me. So basically, I ended up asking the doctor for a supplementary prescription of another antipsychotic that I had responded to in the past in hospital fairly quickly. And so I asked for that from him, a prescription for that medication, just to get me through until I was going to be speaking with my psychiatrist about a week later. And so he was like, well, I don't really know if I'm helping you, but okay, sure. And so that was a little bit of a frustrating thing. You know, this place that literally everyone tells you to go to the emergency room if you're in crisis, kind of was the final step that kind of let me down. And so, you know, I could do a whole video on all of these gaps in the mental health care system. I think there absolutely needs to be a mental health specific emergency room. That, or there needs to be better training for medical professionals beyond just, I think it's like 4 weeks they have to take learning mental health in med school. And so, you know, it's no wonder that he didn't really know how to help me. So anyway, that's everything that happened with the hospital. I got the prescription for the supplementary antipsychotic, and I have been taking that since then. And I finally got to speak with my psychiatrist today. And so I tried to be as open as I could with him about what was going on, how I was experiencing the medications, and tried to figure out a solution for if this should happen again. You know, I let him know that I was disappointed that the avenues that he had told me to take if I was in crisis kind of let me down. And so we formulated kind of a new plan for if this should happen. And so it kind of we decided to up my original antipsychotic that I was on up to a higher dose, which I'm not thrilled with, but okay, if I need to do that to get stable for a while, that's okay. And he also gave me a PRN, which is basically a medication you take as needed, which was the antipsychotic that I asked for the prescription from the ER doctor for. If things got to a crisis point again, the plan now is for me to take that additional antipsychotic and kind of see if that helps at all. And if it doesn't, he told me to then contact my therapist, who could then contact him if need be, or she could kind of try to help me, you know, navigate this whole system. And now if it was happening outside of her hours, to go into the crisis support actual physical building. He kind of let me know that if I actually physically present there, then they have to see me. And so that was kind of helpful. Like, I hope that that will be the case if that should happen again. But ultimately what I want to convey here is the importance of having this kind of plan with your psychiatrist for if things go awry, because this has happened to me a couple times now where things have gotten to a point where I can't manage my symptoms anymore. And it has happened outside of his hours and outside of regular working hours for my therapist as well. And so I really had no other option other than to call crisis support or go to the emergency room. And like I detailed, those really weren't great options. Now, that said, I wasn't in imminent danger to myself or others at the time. And so that was kind of why the emergency room didn't end up being a great option for me. But if you are in a state where you are in danger, the emergency room is probably the best place to be. It's kind of a good place just to keep you safe. But for the purposes of what I needed, which was basically just a med adjustment, it wasn't super helpful. And now, even though it wasn't super helpful, I do also want to touch on the importance of, you know, being able to reach out for help when you need it. And that has been an incredibly steep learning curve for me, but it's something that I feel I am getting better at. When I got home from all of this, I saw in Rob and I's shared internet history, or it popped up on YouTube, videos about how to deal with a loved one's anosognosia. And so that was kind of another, you know, indicator to me, pretty clear indicator that I was dealing with anosognosia. I was dealing with a lack of insight into the fact that my illness was intervening and causing issues for me. But regardless of this, I was able to kind of understand that, you know, he was saying like, hey, I think something's up. I knew that I was thinking that something was up before I kind of slipped into anosognosia. And so I made the decision to, okay, it's worth a shot to go try to get help. And so that's what I did by calling the crisis support line, and that's what I did by going to the emergency room. I want to encourage you that if you are in a place where you can't manage your symptoms and you need support, reach out. And if you don't know where to reach out, that's a great place to start with your doctor to figure out, okay, what steps should I take if I find myself in a crisis situation where I can't manage my symptoms on my own? So that's a quick update on where I'm at right now. Taking it easy. There's been multiple intense stressors actually this last week. And so I'm going to try to give myself as much space to try to take care of myself and help myself heal from this minor psychotic episode that I had. And I'm going to be seeing my psychiatrist again next week, or, talking to them over the phone next week. And so, hopefully this whole episode has laid a foundation for ways to better manage things in the future. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.